The classroom door slammed shut, but the sound couldn't drown out the pounding in Jamal's chest. He stood frozen, his final exam paper crumpled in his fist, the red F glaring like a wound. Mr. Hargrove, his history teacher, had smirked as he handed it back, his words still burning. Some people just aren't cut out for this. Jamal knew the truth. He'd aced every practice test, memorized every date, every war, every treaty. But Hargrove, with his pinched face and cold eyes, had marked him down for months, nitpicking his essays, docking points for attitude. It wasn't about the work. It was about Jamal's skin, his confidence, the way he dared to exist in a mostly white school in suburban Ohio. And now, this failing grade meant no scholarship, no college, no escape from the life that seemed to close in around him. He stumbled into the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing like his thoughts. His best friend, Ethan, was waiting by the lockers, his blonde hair falling into his eyes. Jamal, what's wrong? Ethan's voice was soft, but his blue eyes sharpened with concern. They'd been inseparable since freshman year. Two misfits who found each other in a sea of cliques. Jamal, the black kid from the wrong side of town, and Ethan, the quiet jock who hated the spotlight. Their bond had grown into something deeper, something neither had named until late-night talks turned to shy confessions under the stars. But here, in the harsh light of Lincoln High, they kept it hidden. Hargrove failed me, Jamal said, his voice cracking. On purpose. I know it. He thrust the paper at Ethan, who scanned it, his jaw tightening. The essay was flawless, the kind of work that should have earned a scholarship to Ohio State. Ethan's fingers brushed Jamal's as he handed it back, a fleeting touch that steadied him. That's bullshit, Ethan said, his voice low but fierce. We're not letting this slide. He grabbed Jamal's arm, pulling him toward the principal's office. But Jamal hesitated. He'd seen what happened when you challenged teachers like Hargrove's suspensions. Rumors. Worse. And for a black kid in this town, the stakes were higher. Still, Ethan's determination was a spark, and Jamal felt it catch. The principal's office was a dead end. Mrs. Carter, a tired woman with graying hair, listened politely but shook her head. Mr. Hargrove's grading is final unless there's clear evidence of misconduct, she said, barely glancing at the paper. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Jamal's stomach sank. Evidence. Hargrove wasn't stupid enough to leave a paper trail. Ethan's hand twitched, like he wanted to argue, but Jamal nudged him. They'd have to fight this another way. Outside, the courtyard was alive with students, the buzz of lunch hour filling the air. Jamal's eyes caught on a group of kids from the debate team, whispering and glancing his way. Word was spreading already. He could feel the weight of their stares, the mix of pity and curiosity. Ethan stepped closer, his shoulder brushing Jamal's. A silent promise. We'll figure this out, he whispered. Together. That night, Jamal sat on his bedroom floor, surrounded by textbooks and old tests, all marked with A's until Hargrove's class. His mom was working a double shift at the hospital, so the house was quiet. Too quiet. He texted Ethan, who showed up 20 minutes later, slipping through the back door with a pizza and a plan. We need proof, Ethan said, pacing. Hargrove's been doing this to other kids too, hasn't he? We just need someone to talk. Jamal nodded, thinking of Aisha, a sophomore who dropped Hargrove's class after constant low grades despite her brilliance. Or Miguel, who'd transferred schools after Hargrove called him lazy in front of everyone. The pattern was there, but no one had spoken up. Fear kept them silent. Jamal felt it too, but Ethan's presence, his steady voice, his hand resting on Jamal's knee made the impossible seem possible. They spent hours digging through school forums, old group chats, anything that might hold a clue. Ethan found a post from a graduated senior, now at college, who'd ranted about Hargrove's unfair grading, but hadn't named names. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. As midnight approached, Ethan's eyes were heavy, but he didn't leave. He leaned against Jamal's bed, their shoulders touching, and said, "We're going to expose him. For you. For everyone." Jamal's heart raced, not just from the plan, but from the way Ethan looked at him like he was worth fighting for. In that moment, he wanted to close the distance, to say what they'd both been too scared to voice in public. But the weight of the fight ahead held him back. This wasn't just about them. It was about every kid Hargrove had crushed, every dream he'd tried to bury. By morning, they had a plan. They'd rally other students, gather stories, and present a case so undeniable that the school board would have to act. But as they walked to school, hand in hand until they reached the parking lot, Jamal felt a chill. Hargrove wasn't just a teacher, was a symbol of a system that didn't want kids like him to win. And systems don't fall easily. The cafeteria hummed with noise, but Jamal felt like he was underwater. He sat at a corner table, picking at his food, while Ethan scanned the room for allies. Their plan was simple but daunting: find students willing to share their stories about Hargrove. The problem was, no one wanted to be the first to speak. Fear was a powerful silencer, and Hargrove's reputation as a vindictive teacher didn't help. Ethan slid into the seat next to him, his tray clattering. "Aisha's in," he said, keeping his voice low. "She's pissed about last year. Said Hargrove marked her down for poor analysis even though she cited primary sources." Jamal's hope flickered. Aisha was sharp, fearless in debate club, but even she'd been worn down by Hargrove's tactics. If she was willing to talk, others might follow. They met Aisha after school in the library, where the fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows. She sat across from them, her braids pulled back, her eyes wary but resolute. "He called my work sloppy," she said, her voice tight. "I rewrote that essay 3 times. Perfect citations, perfect structure. Still got a C-." Jamal nodded, his own anger mirrored in her words. Ethan jotted notes, his pen moving fast. "Anyone else?" he asked. "Miguel," Aisha said. "But he's gone. Moved to Columbus after Hargrove humiliated him." She hesitated, then added, "And there's Lena. She's quiet, but she told me Hargrove docked her points for disrespect when she corrected him in class." Jamal's jaw clenched. Lena was a junior, a shy Latina girl who excelled in history but never spoke up. If Hargrove was targeting her too, the pattern was undeniable. That night, they reached out to Lena through a group chat. She was hesitant, her texts short and cautious, but she agreed to meet. The next day, in a quiet corner of the school courtyard, Lena sat with her arms crossed, her eyes darting nervously. "I don't want trouble," she whispered. "My parents, they'll freak if I get suspended." Ethan leaned forward, his voice gentle. "We're not asking you to go public yet. Just tell us what happened." Lena's story was a gut punch. Hargrove had failed her on a major project, claiming her sources were unreliable, even though she'd used the same books as the top students. When she'd questioned him, he'd sneered, "Maybe you're just not cut out for this level." The words echoed what he'd said to Jamal, and the similarity made Ethan's eyes flash with anger. "He's doing this on purpose," Ethan said, "targeting anyone who doesn't fit his idea of a good student." They spent the week gathering more stories. By Friday, they had 5 students willing to share small victories, but enough to build a case. Jamal felt a spark of hope, but it was tempered by dread. Hargrove wasn't just one man. He was backed by a school that turned a blind eye, by parents who called him old school but fair. And then there was the other fear, the one Jamal and Ethan hadn't voiced, their relationship. If they went public with this fight, their bond might come under scrutiny. In a town like theirs, that could make everything harder. Saturday night, they sat in Ethan's car, parked by the lake, the water reflecting the stars. Ethan reached for Jamal's hand, his fingers warm and steady. "You okay?" he asked. Jamal sighed, his head against the window. "I'm scared, Ethan. Not just about Hargrove. About us. If we do this, people will talk. They'll see us." Ethan's grip tightened. "Let them. I'm not ashamed of you. Of us." His voice was fierce, and for a moment, Jamal believed they could face anything. But Monday brought a new blow. Someone had leaked their plan to Hargrove. He called Jamal into his classroom after school, his eyes cold. "I hear you're stirring up trouble," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You think you can take me down? You're just a kid." Jamal's heart pounded, but he held his ground. "I'm not alone," he said. Hargrove's smirk faltered, just for a second, and Jamal knew they'd rattled him. The school halls felt like a battlefield. Whispers followed Jamal everywhere, some supportive, others cruel. By Wednesday, their group had grown to 8 students, each with a story about Hargrove's unfair grading. But the leak had made everyone nervous. Aisha texted late at night, "Someone's talking. Be careful." Jamal's stomach churned. If Hargrove knew their moves, he'd be ready to strike back. Ethan was relentless, though. He'd started a private group chat, encrypted and hidden, where they shared evidence, graded papers, emails, even screenshots of Hargrove's snide comments on assignments. Jamal marveled at Ethan's focus, the way he balanced football practice and this fight without breaking. But late at night, when they were alone, Ethan's mask slipped. "I'm scared too," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "Not of Hargrove. Of losing you." Jamal's heart ached. He wanted to promise they'd be okay, but the world felt too heavy. They decided to take their case to the school board. It was a risky move, bypassing Mrs. Carter meant burning bridges, but they had no choice. Ethan's older sister, a law student, helped them draft a formal complaint, citing patterns of discrimination. Jamal spent hours typing up his own story, his fingers shaking as he described every slight, every unfair grade. The document grew to 10 pages, filled with testimonies from Aisha, Lena, and others. It was solid, but Jamal knew it wouldn't be enough without public support. They needed a spark to rally the school. Ethan had an idea, a petition. They'd circulate it quietly, get signatures, and present it at the next board meeting. But as they worked on it in the library, a shadow fell over their table. It was Tyler, a senior on the football team, Ethan's teammate. "Heard you're going after Hargrove," he said, his voice low. "You sure you want to do this? He's got friends on the board." Ethan didn't flinch. "We're sure," he said. Tyler nodded, hesitant, then added, "I'm in. He failed me on a test I know I aced." Tyler's support was a game changer. He was popular, a star running back, and his voice carried weight. By Friday, their petition had 50 signatures, then 100. Students who'd never spoken to Jamal before were signing, sharing their own stories. The momentum was exhilarating, but it came with a cost. Hargrove started calling students into his office one by one, checking on their progress. Lena came back from one of those meetings in tears, saying he'd threatened to fail her again if she didn't focus on her studies. Jamal and Ethan met that night at the lake again, their safe haven. The air was crisp, the stars bright. Ethan pulled Jamal close, his breath warm against his cheek. "We're close," he said. We can do this. Jamal wanted to believe him, but the fear was a knot in his chest. He thought of his mom, working herself to exhaustion for his future. He thought of the scholarship, slipping away. And he thought of Ethan, risking everything to stand by him. I love you, Jamal said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. Ethan's eyes softened, and he kissed him, soft and sure, under the starlit sky. The next day, they posted the petition online, anonymous but public. It spread like wildfire. By Monday, the school was buzzing students, parents, even local news outlets were talking. Hargrove's face was grim as he walked through the halls, avoiding Jamal's gaze. But the victory felt fragile. Someone had spray-painted a slur on Jamal's locker, and though Ethan scrubbed it off before anyone else saw, the message was clear: not everyone was on their side. The school board meeting was a week away, and the tension was suffocating. Jamal could barely focus in class, his mind racing with what-ifs. The petition now had over 200 signatures, but Hargrove was fighting back. He'd rallied his own supporters' parents who called him tough but fair, teachers who swore by his methods. Rumors swirled that he'd hired a lawyer. Jamal felt like he was drowning, but Ethan was his anchor, always there with a steady hand or a quiet word. They spent hours preparing, rehearsing their speeches, gathering more evidence. Aisha found an old email from Hargrove to a student, dripping with condescension, and Lena dug up a graded test with comments that had nothing to do with the work. Tyler brought in his own failed test, marked with vague critiques that didn't match his answers. The evidence was piling up, but so was the backlash. Someone posted an anonymous blog accusing Jamal of playing the race card. Ethan wanted to track down the author, but Jamal stopped him. We can't fight every hater, he said. We just need to win this. The night before the board meeting, they gathered their group in Ethan's basement. Aisha, Lena, Tyler, and 3 others sat in a circle, papers and laptops scattered around. The air was thick with nerves, but also hope. We're doing this for everyone he's hurt, Aisha said, her voice fierce. Not just us. Jamal nodded, but his eyes kept drifting to Ethan, who was organizing their files with quiet intensity. He wondered what he'd done to deserve someone so fiercely loyal. The morning of the meeting, the school felt different. Students lined the halls, some holding signs, fair grades for all, stop discrimination. Others stood with arms crossed, muttering about troublemakers. Jamal's heart pounded as he and Ethan walked to the auditorium, their hands brushing but not holding. They couldn't afford to draw attention to their relationship now, not when the stakes were so high. The boardroom was packed: parents, teachers, students, even reporters. Hargrove sat in the front row, his face a mask of calm. Jamal's knees shook as he stood to speak, but Ethan's nod from the crowd steadied him. My name is Jamal Carter, he began, his voice clear despite the tremor in his chest. I'm here because Mr. Hargrove failed me on purpose. Not because of my work, but because of who I am. He laid out his case, citing his grades, the pattern of targeting, the testimonies. Aisha spoke next, then Lena, then Tyler. Each story built on the last, a chorus of injustice. The board listened, their faces unreadable. Hargrove's lawyer argued that the accusations were unsubstantiated, that Jamal and his friends were disgruntled students. But the evidence was hard to dismiss, and the crowd's murmurs grew louder. When Ethan stood to speak, Jamal's breath caught. I'm not a straight-A student, Ethan said, his voice steady. But I know right from wrong. What's happening here is wrong, and we won't stop until it's fixed. The room erupted in applause, and Jamal felt a surge of pride and fear. Ethan was putting himself on the line, not just for Jamal, but for everyone. As they left the meeting, The crowd parted for them, some cheering, others glaring. Jamal felt exposed, but Ethan's hand found his. A quick squeeze before they let go. They'd done it. They'd spoken truth to power. But the fight wasn't over. The aftermath of the board meeting was chaos. Social media exploded with hashtags Justice for Jamal, Fire Hargrove. Local news ran stories, some sympathetic, others accusing the students of overreacting. Jamal's phone buzzed constantly, but he ignored it, focusing on Ethan's voice as they sat in his room. "We shook them up," Ethan said, a small smile breaking through his exhaustion. "They have to do something now." But days passed, and the school board stayed silent. Hargrove was still teaching, his classes continuing as if nothing had happened. Jamal's hope began to fray. What if they'd fought for nothing? What if Hargrove won? Ethan sensed his doubt and pulled him close, their foreheads touching. "We're not done," he said. "We'll keep pushing." Aisha had an idea, a protest. Not just a petition, but a visible stand in the school courtyard. They'd make it impossible for the board to ignore them. The group met in secret, planning banners, chants, a schedule to keep it peaceful but loud. Tyler used his football connections to spread the word. And by the next week, they had a plan. The protest would happen Friday, during lunch, when the whole school would see. Thursday night, Jamal couldn't sleep. He sat on his roof, staring at the stars, his mind racing. His mom had come home early for once, and when he'd told her everything, she'd hugged him fiercely. "I'm proud of you," she said, tears in her eyes. "But be careful. People like Hargrove don't go down easy." Her words echoed now, mingling with his fear for Ethan. If this protest backfired, they could both face suspension or worse. Friday morning, the school buzzed with anticipation. By lunch, the courtyard was packed. Jamal, Ethan, Aisha, and the others stood at the center, holding signs and unfair grading, equality in education. Aisha led the chants, her voice carrying over the crowd. Students joined in, some hesitant, others loud. Jamal's heart swelled as he saw faces he didn't expect: kids from the chess club, the drama team, even a few teachers watching quietly. But then Hargrove appeared, flanked by 2 security guards. "Disperse," he barked, his voice cutting through the chants. "This is unauthorized." The crowd faltered, but Aisha didn't back down. "We're not breaking any rules," she shouted. "We're standing up for what's right." The students roared in support, and Jamal felt a surge of courage. He stepped forward, locking eyes with Hargrove. "You failed me because of who I am," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But we're not invisible anymore." Hargrove's face reddened, but before he could respond, Ethan was beside Jamal, his presence a shield. "You can't silence us," Ethan said. The crowd cheered louder, phones out, recording everything. For a moment, it felt like they'd won. But then the principal arrived, her face grim. "This ends now," she said, "or there will be consequences." The protest dispersed, but the energy lingered. That night, videos of the standoff went viral. Parents called the school, demanding answers. The board finally announced an investigation into Hargrove's grading practices. It was a small victory, but Jamal knew the real battle was just beginning. As he and Ethan sat by the lake, their hands entwined, he felt a mix of fear and hope. They were in this together, no matter what came next. The investigation dragged on, each day a test of patience. Jamal and Ethan went to school braced for retaliation, but Hargrove kept his distance, his classes eerily normal. Behind the scenes, though, the pressure was building. The board had hired an independent reviewer to examine Hargrove's grading records. and whispers of discrepancies started to spread. Jamal clung to that hope, but the waiting was torture. Their group stayed tight, meeting in secret to share updates. Aisha found a retired teacher willing to testify about Hargrove's history of bias. And Tyler got a teammate to admit Hargrove had targeted him too. The evidence was mounting, but so was the backlash. Anonymous threats appeared in Jamal's inbox, calling him a troublemaker. Worse, Ethan wanted to report them, but Jamal shook his head. "They want us scared," he said. "We can't let them win." One night, as they sat in Ethan's car, Jamal broke. "What if this ruins everything?" he whispered. "My mom's counting on me. If I lose that scholarship." Ethan cupped his face, his thumbs brushing away tears Jamal hadn't realized were falling. "You're not alone," Ethan said. "We'll get through this. I promise." His kiss was fierce, a lifeline in the dark. The turning point came unexpectedly. A local reporter, tipped off by the protest videos, dug into Hargrove's past. She found a pattern complaints from students of color stretching back years, buried by the school. Her article hit the front page, and suddenly, the board couldn't ignore the pressure. They called an emergency meeting, and this time, the whole town seemed to show up. Jamal and Ethan sat in the packed auditorium, their group around them. The reviewer presented her findings. Hargrove's grading showed statistically significant bias against Black and Latino students. The room gasped, then erupted in murmurs. Hargrove's lawyer tried to spin it, claiming clerical errors, but the evidence was damning. The board voted to suspend Hargrove pending a full investigation. Cheers broke out, but Jamal felt numb. It was a win, but it didn't feel like enough. After the meeting, students mobbed them, some apologizing for staying silent, others thanking them for speaking up. Aisha hugged Jamal, tears in her eyes. "We did it," she said. But as they left, Jamal saw Hargrove in the parking lot, his face twisted with rage. "This isn't over," he hissed, low enough that only Jamal heard. A chill ran through him, but Ethan's hand on his back grounded him. That night, they celebrated quietly at the lake, just the two of them. Ethan pulled out a small notebook, where he'd written a poem for Jamal, words about strength, love, fighting for what's right. Jamal's throat tightened as he read it, the stars above blurring through tears. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. Ethan smiled, soft and sure. "You don't have to. Just keep being you." Hargrove's suspension didn't end the fight, it shifted it. The school was a powder keg, split between those who celebrated and those who saw Hargrove as a martyr. Jamal and Ethan walked the halls with their heads high, but the glares followed. Some teachers gave them cold shoulders, while others quietly slipped Jamal new assignments to boost his grade. It was progress, but it felt fragile, like a house of cards in a storm. The scholarship board reached out, offering Jamal a chance to resubmit his application with a revised transcript. It was a lifeline, but the deadline was tight, and the pressure was crushing. He spent nights rewriting essays, studying for makeup tests, Ethan by his side with coffee and quiet encouragement. "You've got this," Ethan would say, his hand brushing Jamal's. Those moments kept Jamal going, even when exhaustion threatened to win. But the town wasn't done with them. Hargrove's supporters organized a counter-protest, holding signs like "Support our teachers" and "Stop false accusations." Jamal's mom begged him to stay safe. Her worry etched deep. "I'm trying," he told her, but he couldn't back down now. Not when Aisha, Lena, and the others were still fighting, still sharing their stories online to keep the pressure on. One afternoon, as they left school, a group of older kids blocked their path. "You think you're heroes," one sneered. "You're just tearing everything apart." Ethan stepped in front of Jamal, his fists clenched. But Jamal pulled him back. "They're not worth it," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. The kids backed off, but the encounter left a mark. That night, Ethan admitted, "I wanted to punch him." "For you." Jamal shook his head, pulling him close. "We fight with truth, not fists." The final board meeting was set for the end of the month. Hargrove's fate would be decided, and Jamal's scholarship hung in the balance. They prepared relentlessly, gathering more evidence, more testimonies. Aisha's retired teacher contact came through, providing a sworn statement about Hargrove's past. The reporter kept digging, uncovering emails where Hargrove dismissed complaints as excuses. The tide was turning, but Jamal couldn't shake the fear that it wouldn't be enough. The night before the meeting, Ethan took Jamal to their spot by the lake. They lay on a blanket, the stars above them like a promise. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Ethan said, his voice soft, "I'm proud of you. Of us." Jamal turned to him, their faces inches apart. "I love you," he said, the words easier now. Ethan's smile was brighter than the moon. "I love you too." As they held each other, the world felt both bigger and smaller, full of hate, but also full of hope. Jamal knew the fight wasn't just about Hargrove anymore. It was about every kid who'd been told they weren't enough, every dream that had been crushed. And it was about them, two boys who'd found love in the middle of a storm. The auditorium was a sea of faces: students, parents, reporters, all waiting for the board's decision. Jamal sat in the front row, Ethan beside him, their hands hidden but touching. Aisha, Lena, and Tyler were there too, their faces a mix of hope and fear. The air crackled with tension as the board chair stood, her voice steady but heavy. "The investigation has concluded," she said. "Mr. Hargrove's grading practices showed clear bias against certain students. He has been terminated, effective immediately." The room exploded, cheers from their side, boos from Hargrove's supporters. Jamal's breath caught, relief flooding him. Ethan squeezed his hand, his smile fierce. They'd done it. But the victory wasn't clean. Hargrove's lawyer vowed to appeal, and some parents were already planning a lawsuit, claiming unfair targeting. The board promised to review grading policies across the school, a small step toward change. Jamal's scholarship was reinstated, his transcript corrected, and Ohio State sent a letter of acceptance. It was everything he'd fought for, but the cost was heavy: friendships strained, threats still lingering in his inbox. The next day, the school held an assembly. Jamal and his group were asked to speak, to share what they'd learned. He stood at the podium, his voice shaking at first, then growing stronger. "This wasn't just about me," he said. "It was about all of us who've been told we don't belong. We do. And we'll keep fighting to prove it." The applause was deafening, but Jamal's eyes found Ethan in the crowd, his quiet nod worth more than any cheer. After, they walked to the courtyard, where students had gathered with signs and flowers, a makeshift celebration. Aisha hugged them both, laughing through tears. Lena, usually so quiet, spoke up. "You gave me my voice back." Tyler clapped Jamal on the shoulder, his grin wide. For the first time, Jamal felt like he belonged not just to Ethan, but to this community they'd built. That night, they went to the lake one last time before Jamal's move to college. The stars were bright, the air warm. Ethan pulled out his notebook, reading a new poem about love that endures, about fighting for what's right. Jamal listened, his heart full, and when the poem ended, he kissed Ethan, long and slow, unafraid of who might see. They'd faced a system that tried to break them and came out stronger. Hargrove was gone, but the bigger fight for equality, for love, for a world that saw them would continue. As they held each other under the stars, Jamal knew they'd face it together, their love a quiet rebellion against hate. And that was enough.